I can't hear you, Terry. Hold on.
That's because I'm muted. Like I said, we will figure out this live thing eventually. Welcome to TNA Top 10, hour number 2. I was not here for hour number 1. I'm sure that went well. Today, we are going to do the ACC football preview.
Uh, I know we're talking about the ACC, but did you see the news that dropped on Michigan this afternoon?
I did not. I've been busy. Well, tell me about the news that dropped on Michigan.
So I told you last year I thought more the new head coach, Harbaugh's assistant, would be the scapegoat.
Yeah.
They've got a draft filed with a bunch of level 1 complaints over the Spygate, whatever they're calling it, with the Connor Stallions buying tickets and going to games, and he's named again. They've called Harbaugh uncooperative because he wouldn't give them his personal cell phone to look at the text messages. There's 50 plus deleted text messages from Moore. Things are going to pop off there in Michigan if the NCAA has their way, Terry.
Well, that's kind of what happened when he bought somebody a cheeseburger, right? He wouldn't cooperate, and that's why he got in trouble.
Yeah, so in October of 23, Moore got his hand slapped and was named, and now because this has happened again, he's considered a repeat offender, which automatically elevates the infraction, the infraction or the
level of it or whatever.
Yeah, so it's instead yeah. So if level 2 is not as bad, level 1 is worse or whatever, it elevates it because he's supposedly a serial offender or whatever. But my point is the NCAA once again coming after Michigan, and it has nothing to do with the ACC. But I didn't know because that news broke this afternoon.
Yeah, and I didn't know about it. I didn't see any of it.
So it is crazy. They're coming after him, because he was a coordinator or whatever. They're talking about that if they could put some violation in place for Harbaugh if he was ever to return to college. Now this is a draft; it hasn't been sent yet, but of course it's been leaked out. Imagine that. So how does that work in America, where people know what's happening before the draft has actually been filed or the complaint's been filed?
Well, I mean, and we talk about
complaints. Tell him, Terry. Tell him about the lawsuit.
Filed, I think the very first thing that we need to talk about with the ACC is Florida State and Clemson. I guess Florida State really leading the way there, but the big news is Florida State and Clemson are still going to be talked about this year in the preseason because they are still in the ACC. We keep hearing Big 12. Possibly next year, but they are ACC teams, and they're the cream of the crop. And we'll learn about that more as we do the rankings. But Florida State and Clemson, they're still there in the ACC. That's why the ACC is still important.
Yeah, 251-page document recently released 2 days ago, heavily redacted. One of the things that was key they took out of it is that the principals do agree the contract expires in 27, not 36. 36 is with the extension for ESPN. So the television rights, I mean, you and I have talked about it, Terry. The reason this is a big deal is because of the sheer amount of money. That's why this is a big deal. If there wasn't this type of money tied to it, Florida State and Clemson would be gone. I mean, their asses would be out. We wouldn't even be talking about the ACC because we both love Miami so much.
Oh yeah, that's it.
We'll get there in a minute, but
we don't love them as much as Dave loves them.
Dave loves Miami. I heard that. I might have started that rumor, but it's okay. What's George say? If it doesn't matter if it's true, if I believe it, So yeah, I heard Dave in the HSV loves Miami, the Hurricanes especially. Oh no.
And here he is to defend himself.
You set me up. There he is.
Talking about his love of the Hurricanes.
Oh, do I? Look behind me. Look at the couch. Does that look like a Miami Hurricane couch to you?
No.
Obviously, this is a rib. I heard you're the biggest Miami fan since Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yeah. That's why The Rock sucks, because he went to Miami.
Oh, my God. He did win a national championship sitting on the bench.
Yeah, I was going to say he didn't play.
He didn't play behind Warren Sapp. Dave in the HSV is here, ladies and gentlemen. So live corrections are happening on the air. And apparently the first one is he is not a Florida State fan or a Miami fan. He is a Florida State fan. And Dave, remind everybody who the greatest Florida State football player of all time is.
Jameis Winston.
Ron Simmons. That was a softball, and you went with the lobster thief or the crab thief. Come on now.
No,
It's Ron
Simmons is the greatest defensive player of Florida State history. Greatest offensive player of Florida State history is probably Chris Winkie, but for all shits and giggles, we're going Jameis Winston.
Winkie, Ward, Winston. Who was the running back? 14 to 16?
Warwick Dunn.
No.
Oh, no,
not
14 to 16 was Cook, Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
Dalvin Cook. Yeah, he was hell. So anyway, Dave's here, guys, and that means we're going to talk about the ACC. Miami will get mentioned. Here's why. I posed this question to you all earlier, and Terry's been busy. I don't think he got. The sports writers are all up on their jock talking about how Miami is going to win the ACC, and that's on what is it? ES3 or what's the one we look at a lot, Terry, for the recruiting?
It's
E3.
On three, yeah.
They're putting Miami as the odds-on favorite to win the ACC right now.
Yeah.
I don't see it. We'll get there. We'll just get there. But Dave,
we should mention. Well, let me throw this in there, and I did mark it down here. Sorry to cut you off there, but
no, you did.
We got 3 teams added to the ACC this year. Nobody left, but we got 3 new teams. Cal and Stanford. Those Atlantic Coast universities, California and Stanford,
known for
SMU and in the Atlantic Coast of Texas. Those 3 teams are added to the ACC.
Yeah. So Dave, you're our guest. You get 2 questions. We're asking, you are answering. First, thoughts on the lawsuit with Clemson and FSU.
Obviously,
because Dave's a hardcore fan, guys. I was busting his balls about being a Miami guy, but he is a hardcore football fan and he knows his shit. So, Dave, thoughts on the lawsuit first?
Obviously, I just left my On3 subscription. So I went back to Rivals, which On3 has warchant.com, which is much better than whatever the fuck it's called on Rivals now. But I go to another board on Rivals called the main board. So I like that a lot better. And I just got tired of some of the bullshit on the Warchant one. But for the last couple years, I've been following this. A lot of this news broke to Florida State fans more than 2 years ago. So it didn't really break into the news until damn near last August. So there is a lot of stuff being talked about, a lot of stuff being said. What you just said about the real grant of rights and the deal with ESPN running up in 2027. I've known about that for 6 months, but nobody wants to talk about that. ESPN has the right to extend the ACC's contract. As of right now, it does not look like ESPN really gives 2 shits about extending the ACC's contract because the ACC went and brought in Stanford, Cal, and SMU. Now, that does give you the California market. It does give you the Dallas market for SMU. But these aren't football powerhouses. Stanford might be the greatest college in terms of athletics when you really think about it and the number of national championships they have in all the other sports that don't draw a dime. But how is the ACC money? They're making about half of what the Big Ten and the SEC are paying out to their schools. You have Cal. Cal has more miles this year to travel in college football than the circumference of the earth. And Cal, and only, you remember, there's 12 games in college. There's 17 in the NFL. Cal is flying more miles than any team in the NFL this year.
And we're going to get to it next week. I don't want to cut you off, but when you're talking about like Washington and Oregon traveling to Penn State and Ohio and same with USC and UCLA, this realignment is absolutely ridiculous. Last week's wasn't so bad. Let's be honest. The Big 12 is not as bad. This, to your point, you are going coast to coast for Cal to play Miami as an example, Florida State and Tallahassee as an example. And
here's what people aren't really thinking about. Okay, that's football.
Got to do it in every other sport.
What about ladies volleyball?
You got to do it in
ladies
every other
swimming,
sport.
ladies golf. How is that going to generate any money at all?
You're not.
It's
And
not.
Nick Saban said that a year ago, that
Right.
while you can criticize it, Alabama football paid for everything else.
Yeah, and that's Florida. You want to know why Florida State's football program has the best shit in the world when it comes to anything going in Florida State? Because it pays for it.
Right.
That's how it is for for Clemson, for Florida State, for LSU, for Florida, Miami is. I don't know what the hell's going on with Miami, but Alabama,
They got better
Auburn.
stuff to do. Yeah.
So,
but Terry will tell you, Auburn,
Miami was a great school, and I'll tell you this: Miami was a great school. The thing that hurts Miami the most, they do not have a stadium on campus.
Right.
Their stadium is not in Coral Gables. It's way the hell over wherever the hell.
Yeah, where are they playing now? Because
they play where the Dolphins play.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like 45 minutes from campus.
Okay. I just didn't remember. That's all. Sorry.
And Miami might have a fan base, but those games are empty unless Florida State is in town.
Yeah.
Empty.
Has to matter.
And even when Florida State's in town, it's a 70,000 seat stadium. There's a good 25,000 Noles there, 30,000 Noles. Florida State travels. I think ultimately Florida State is going to end up in the Big Ten. I hope I'm wrong because I just moved from Big Ten country. Selfishly, I hope Florida State ends up in the Southeastern Conference where they belong.
Mm-hmm.
They have to get out of the ACC. The ACC is doing nothing but bringing them down. The ACC is bringing Clemson down.
Mm-hmm.
And Florida State initiated the lawsuit because they have no choice. And the reason why you're not hearing much about anything is because technically no one can talk to Florida State because that's contract tampering.
Right.
But if you don't think there's back channels between the SEC and the Big Ten and all that, dude, you're sorely mistaken, because the only way that Florida State Seminoles or the Clemson Tigers or the North Carolina Tar Heels, we're going to go a little bit further. The only way these teams stay in the ACC is the ACC gets rid of their equal revenue sharing program and they start giving these teams what they're really worth, because teams like Wake Forest, Boston College, Syracuse, they're dog shit. They don't make any money. They don't deserve the same kind of money that Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina's make.
Oh, man. See, that's the funny thing about it, because you got Texas, who was kind of in that situation in the Big 12, kind of gave that up to go to the SEC, because the SEC is paying Vanderbilt the same amount of money that it pays Alabama when we have these bowl games. So that is an interesting
Eventually,
situation.
this is all going to grow into a bigger pot.
Yeah.
And college football is going to be separate from everything else with the NCAA.
Yep.
And you're going to have your SEC and your Big Ten and a couple other schools here and there. They're going to be separated. But I could see the likes of a Purdue or Rutgers or Vanderbilt getting left out in some kind of big overall conference, because who would you rather have, Purdue or Clemson?
Yeah.
Who would you rather have, Vanderbilt or Florida State? Who would you rather have, Rutgers or North Carolina? And I'm not even talking about North Carolina in terms of a football powerhouse, but here's something that a lot of people don't understand. I am originally from North Carolina. The University of North Carolina is the oldest university in America. It was the very first university in our country. Now, there's 3 big state schools in the state of North Carolina. You have North Carolina. I guess it's not a state school, but Duke's. You have a private school in Duke, and you have NC State. So the vast majority of everybody that lives in North Carolina is a fan of either North Carolina, Duke, or NC State. You might have gone to East Carolina, but you still pull for one of those 3. You might have gone to Appalachian State, but you still pull for one of those 3. What North Carolina has that a lot of people don't understand is money. The University of North Carolina is one of the richest universities in America with their boosters. They have a lot of very high dollar boosters, and I'm talking about big time. They're at the levels of Notre Dame, of Texas, of things like that. People just don't understand that. Now, right now, they're not really putting a lot of money towards this NIL thing, but it's coming. And North Carolina is not going to get left behind. And if North Carolina goes somewhere, Virginia goes with them. So, does the Big Ten take North Carolina, Virginia, Notre Dame? Or do they take a Notre Dame, Florida State, Clemson to get that southern market with Florida State and Clemson? Because I tell you right now, the SEC does not want Florida State in the Big Ten. And they don't want Clemson in the Big Ten. Because they don't want the Big Ten coming into their market. And that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So Florida State and Clemson, I think eventually Florida State and Clemson will end up in one of those two. And North Carolina and Virginia are going to be the other two. Mm-hmm. And that's because they want North Carolina. Virginia is a very prestigious academic institute. You know, they won the national championship in basketball a couple years ago.
We don't care about that.
Baseball, but North Carolina and Virginia can't be separated. So they have to go together. So if North Carolina goes somewhere, Virginia's going. And that's going to be how the deal works. Just people just don't know that.
No.
We're going to have so many conversations about as this whole process and every step of these things as we go to court.
Yeah.
And as we get through this season and go into next season,
and see, Florida State
information.
There's $500 billion on the line. Let's face it, guys. That just get down to it. There's $500 billion at stake with these contracts.
And the thing is the ACC's fighting and clawing and doing everything they can, because if Florida State and Clemson leave, and then that opens the door for your North Carolinas and your Virginias.
Yeah.
Or anybody else.
There is no more ACC.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, your Duke and your North Carolina State and your Virginia Tech, they're going to be out the door to the Big 12. I could see the Big 10 gobbling up Georgia Tech at some point to get into that Atlanta market.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody else, Boston College, Syracuse, Wake Forest, nobody gives a shit about Wake Forest. It is what it is. If you're a Wake Forest fan, I'm sorry, but you're a small market team. You're a small university, and nobody watches you. Nobody ever goes, hey, you know, I live in Kansas. Boy, I can't wait to get home and watch that Wake Forest game.
Ironically enough, another North Carolina school, too.
Exactly.
The forgotten one.
But nobody's a fan of Wake Forest. They're a fan of the other three, like he said.
Well, the problem is Wake Forest is a very small school. The only way the ACC stays alive is they obviously will have to bring in other schools.
Yeah.
Like if Florida State leaves, I could see a USF coming into the ACC.
It makes more sense. Some of these teams that are on the Atlantic coast that have joined the Big 12, it makes sense if Florida State and Clemson leave, that some of these teams would go back over to the ACC.
Well, and here's the other thing. Basketball aside, Clemson and Florida State are the only football teams to win national championships in this conference in the last 20 years.
In the last 40 years. 1980.
Miami won in 2001.
They weren't in the conference.
They weren't in the ACC?
Big East at that point?
Was it
Big East?
They were in the
Big East. They were in the Big East.
Well, point being,
Miami, here's what's happening. The problem.
We're being corrected live on the air. Here we go.
Miami and Virginia Tech came to the ACC along with Syracuse and Boston College, all from the Big East.
Yeah, I know that, but what year was it? 03, 04?
04.
04.
2004.
Okay. So
yeah,
Miami should have gone back to back, but whatever.
So, and on top of that, Miami, ever since they've come to the ACC, they have won 0 ACC championships and only have 1 10-win season.
Yeah. No, I get it.
This ain't the Miami from the 80s, man.
Right.
And as good as in the 90s, you had Nebraska was a power.
We can't talk about them. I'm banned. It's next week, Dave. Next week.
We have Nebraska, you have Florida State, you have Florida, and you had Miami, who all those 4 schools right there, pretty much the national championship revolved around those 4 schools. And for the longest time, the BCS champion or the BCS game was played from a team from Florida.
Yep. 100%.
So when those 3 schools are clicking, there's nothing like it, because you have to think back in those 90s, me growing up, Clemson wasn't the powerhouse in the 90s that they were now. So everything revolved around Florida State and Miami, which would play in early October, and Florida State and Florida, which would play the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Those were everything else was pretty much chalked up as a W.
Yeah.
Those 2 games right there, you just didn't know.
Yeah, and to your point, Bobby Bowden, fantastic. And the other thing was, I saw an interesting statistic. It doesn't matter, but to Dave's point, that's the only reason it matters. Oklahoma and Nebraska represented the Big 8 in the Orange Bowl 21 times. Missouri did it once. I believe it was Missouri. May have been Colorado. But anyway, point being, you were going to see Oklahoma or Nebraska play Miami or Florida State or Florida or whoever. It was going to be in the Orange Bowl. And that was when bowl games mattered. And we're going to get to that in a second here, Dave, because we're going to rank the top 10 ACC teams, save for your Florida State Seminoles taking that big ass whooping last year from Georgia, 62.
We'll get into it.
Yeah, when you play the walk-ons and the blind kids, it's going to happen.
There'll be a
here's
spot for that.
what I'll give you. Here's what I'll give you.
I
pulled this up for you. Miami has a very good shot of winning the ACC championship this year.
Mm-hmm.
Here's why.
Not
only that, but here's Miami's out of conference. They opened the season with Florida. This is a very down Florida Gator team. That can be anything.
Yeah.
I believe Billy Napier will be fired. That's how bad Florida will be this year. Go ahead, Dave.
They then play FAMU, Division I AA. They then play Ball State. They then play South Florida. They get into ACC play. They play Virginia Tech, California, Louisville, Florida State, Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, Syracuse. They play one ranked opponent, Florida State.
You're assuming they'll be ranked, which they should be, honestly. I'm just ribbing you.
I mean, unless somebody gets injured or something catastrophic happens.
Right.
Florida State should be a top 10 team.
Yeah.
Miami could very well be a top 10 team this year because their schedule is Charmin soft.
Terry, Dave said top 10. Do we rank top 10s around here, or do we just talk about Miami football?
Our listeners rank top 10s, and we tell them where they're wrong, so why don't we get that started? This week's top 10 is the ACC preseason top 10 for football.
This was, before Terry hits the slide, this was hard. This was not an easy conference.
Right.
Because I rank them all. This was not an easy conference to pick. Because I think you've got 4 or 5 at the top, and you got everybody else.
And we got about 1 billion teams to rank here.
Yeah.
I was having trouble squeezing all the logos on this thing.
Do we want to mention Notre Dame real quick? The reason we put them with the ACC is that seems to be in most collegiate sports where they revolve and play and stay.
Yeah, and they tip their toe in the water a little bit, but don't commit. That's why I say join a conference Notre Dame on my tag here.
And as a reminder, fans, Notre Dame can run the table, beat everybody by 50 because they're not in a conference. The best seed they hope for in the playoff is number 6.
And we love that rule.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6.
They'll join. Eventually, they're going to join.
But anyway, Terry, who did not make the top 10 this week?
Let's talk about the bottom 8.
8.
And those will be Boston College, California, Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, Stanford, Syracuse, Virginia, and Wake Forest. And I think this was probably my bottom 8. It's fairly reasonable. That's a lot of teams. So a couple of these teams are probably decent, but when you're picking 18 teams, somebody's got to be the bottom 8.
I agree with that.
Probably. Yeah.
I agree with that. I would swap 2. Well, I would swap 1 from the bottom 8.
Tell us when we get there. I don't think the Pac-12 inserts are getting respected, but since David Shaw left Stanford, it has been off the rails. Cal has not been good for a very long time. Syracuse started hot last year and failed, but remember, Syracuse picked up the Ohio State quarterback who went 11-1 and was fired from his job.
And we'll get into that too.
Oh,
We won't, because we don't have a slide for them because they're in the bottom 8. So
that's true. Mind. But Syracuse, I forget the guy's name. He went 11-1. They lost to Michigan. Kyle McCourt. Thank you, Terry. Kyle McCourt. They went 11-1.
Who did Syracuse hire after they fired Dino Babers?
Oh, good question. It was because he didn't make it. We all doing the gimmick here.
Yeah, we got to get back. Adrian Autry.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I don't think the former Pac-12 teams are getting the respect. But they
probably a basketball coach. Sorry, that's men's basketball. I'm like, that did not sound right. So somebody's going to call me.
Their head coach is Fran Brown.
Fran Brown, yeah. So that's blame Terry on that one. Give me a dirty comment on YouTube.
Blame Terry.
I really don't care when you do that.
We love it.
I don't know. I don't think that Syracuse is ever going to be a hotbed again. It's just not a. Who the hell wants to go live in Syracuse?
Well, they got kind of the same thing though, right? They got the Carrier Dome or whatever where they play.
Yeah, they're big, but even the basketball's falling off.
No.
Boeheim's gone. It's not going to be the same, man.
And I don't know
unless they pump money into it.
We'd have to look, but I don't know that any of these teams finished over 500 last year.
Cal was 500. Georgia Tech finished.
Cal went to a bowl.
Did they? Georgia Tech was 7-5 last year.
Okay, but they were not very good. Boston College gave Florida State all they wanted for a while. And,
yeah, they did. That game was weird. Florida State was up by 30, and the next thing you know, they're about to lose. That was crazy.
Yeah, gave them all they wanted there for a minute, but.
Well, let's quit talking about the bottom 8 and figure out who we got at the top 10. Why don't we hit number 10, Virginia Tech, and they got the same head coach and quarterback coming back this year. They were 7-6 last year, and they had a winning conference record, and they beat Tulane in the Military Bowl. So, they got an entire 11 starters on offense coming back. So, at first when I was starting to look into this, I was thinking Virginia Tech, I don't have a lot of faith in, but they got a lot coming back from a team that won 7 ball games last year.
Your thoughts, Dave?
If I was picking the top 10 with including Notre Dame, I would actually put Georgia Tech in over Virginia Tech right now. So those would be my 2 swaps.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech. I don't know, man. It's not the same Virginia Tech you had when Frank Beamer was running the show. So it's a whole different, you had Fuentes was there for a few years and just completely destroyed the program. And so now it's going to be, can Pry bring it back? Drones was decent last year. I mean, he's not going to win any awards, but I don't see that. That's just tough. You have schools like Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech that can be flipped, but I think Georgia Tech they're growing and they're starting to get it together. And if they put money into that program, it could be a monster again.
Shocker, I disagree with Dave. Virginia Tech defense is what won them a lot of games last year, and they've got 8 starters back, 11 starters. This has to put them. I know, because they're my guys, that Nebraska is number 3 for returning starters this year. These guys have to be up there. Seriously.
Just lost 3. Yeah.
Well, you're doing something good when you think about this in this day and age in college football. If you're returning 19 starters, you're doing something good because in NIL,
we said that last week. We said that last week. Whatever team it was, it might have been Georgia, Terry. That even Kirby Smart.
Yeah.
with all of the talent he has, is returning 18 or 19 starting football players
Right.
on team that went undefeated in the regular season. So anyway, I think Virginia Tech should improve a little bit this year. It all depends too on their schedule, because if we've seen the last couple weeks we've done this, guys, that when you get to those middle teams, as Terry calls them, that GABA teams or whatever you want to call it,
That's right.
that group though, they're all interchangeable. And this conference has 18 teams if you count Notre Dame. So anyway, who's number 9?
Number 9 is Duke.
Too high.
So there are some changes at Duke. Last year they had a good season with Mike Elko and Riley Leonard at quarterback, but there is a little bit of hope, and there is a name on here. They got some changes here. Manny Diaz is the new head coach, but Malik Murphy, who got tired of being one of 3 possible starting quarterbacks at Texas, said, screw this, I'm going to go to Duke. Now, they don't have much coming back. They got 5 starters on offense and 3 on defense. I don't know. It's Mike Elko left. He did a great job last year.
No.
What can Manny Diaz do? I mean, he's a
where Manny Diaz went to school?
Miami, wasn't it?
Seminole, buddy.
Was he a Seminole? Well, he was the head coach at Miami before he was the DC at Penn State last year and helped lead a top 5 defense. They'll be good enough to make some stops, but this is Riley Leonard being hurt last year is really what hurt Duke. I mean, you saw that Duke Clemson game. Down, I mean, just you talk about guts. And
Duke had a great defense last year. Mike Elko's a hell of a coach, and I'm interested to see what he does at Texas A&M. But we're talking about ACC, so
Manny Diaz, he's not going to get it done.
This is a rebuild project for Manny Diaz.
He's not a
so
head coach.
He's a DC. He was a great defensive coordinator at Miami. He became their head coach. He got fired, obviously, went to Penn State, turned that around, but it sucks for teams like Duke, because if you ever do get a good coach like Elko, they're just a rental, buddy. They're gone as soon as it is.
A lot of times, if you get a good quarterback, they're gone. I mean,
because
these guys aren't staying at these kind of teams.
They followed him to A&M too. A lot of those players transferred out to go to A&M once he took that position.
And then Riley Leonard went to Notre Dame. We'll get there.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at number 8. NC State. Dave Doran is still there. Brennan Armstrong was the quarterback last year for a 9-4 team. They won the Pop-Tarts Bowl and got to eat that mascot. We talked about that last year. They had a good season at NC State last year. Dave Doran's still there, but Grayson McCall listed at starter for a team bringing back 10 total starters.
I definitely don't agree with this one. With them at, what is this, 8?
8.
Yeah, I put them up somewhere around 4.
Yeah.
I'm 4 or 5. The Wolfies are that team nobody wants to play. They will beat Clemson this year. And I can't. I have a team that I put number 2 for a reason. When we get to them, I will mention it. But yeah, Wolfpack, they're a good football team. Dorian's not the best coach. He says some stupid crap that gets the locals all, fired up and that sort of thing. But they play out there in Raleigh. It's loud. It's a heck.
They have a great home field advantage. Their environment is great. Yeah. At Carter Finley Stadium. Yeah, it's great. It's a loud stadium. It only holds 60 something. But their fan base is rabid. So
rabid. I mean, this is the same team that during a hurricane, it was Hurricane Matthew dumped 18 inches of water in 8 hours here in Goldsboro. This team, or these fans, sat out in that hurricane and watched the Wolfpack take down Clemson, 2016. No reason for it. None whatsoever. But that's how rabid they are. They sat through a hurricane. And
if McCall has a good year, NC State could win the ACC.
Yeah, I
Just
think they
Barr
suffer
and Dave
from
Doran
being
doing something
seen.
stupid.
They suffer from being seen as the other school, I think, in
Yeah.
the state, and I
They
think
are
people
by
just don't have that
far,
name recognition.
as of right now, they have the best football fan base in the state
Yep.
of North Carolina.
I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. I also agree that they're not, Terry, and then it's just my opinion. I don't think they're the other school when it comes to football, despite the fact Mac Brown is
Right.
the head coach of the Tar Heels. They are certainly the other school when it comes to basketball, and there's
Right.
two of them, But the other thing is the Wolfies will beat Duke and Carolina in basketball. They play hard in every sport. They play tough. They've had great players there before, like Russell Wilson and so many others. The question mark for me here isn't that they don't belong higher than 8. It's that there are going to be 3 or 4 teams that are 9-3, 10-2, 11-1.
A lot of it's going to depend on their schedule. Let's see their schedule. NC State.
Yeah, that's the thing with these big conferences now. You really got to dig in because so technically, we're not really saying
NC State could finish with 1 loss in the ACC
because they play Florida State. Is that what you're saying?
No, they don't play Florida State. They play Clemson away, and they play Wake Forest, Syracuse, Cal, Stanford, Duke, Georgia Tech, Carolina. They don't play Florida State or Miami.
Yep.
So technically, we're asking people to do a ranking. So based on the size of these conferences, the ranking of the best teams is not necessarily going to line up very well with the standings based on what Dave's saying here, because you might have teams that might do pretty well because they don't play the big name teams.
And gun to my head, I'd put them at lowest 4.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's
maybe
look
5.
at number 7.
That's maybe 5 since we're talking Notre Dame. Notre Dame, when I think of the ACC,
Right.
I don't include Notre Dame, but
we didn't have anywhere else to put them, buddy.
Yeah.
Number 7, SMU comes in after an 11-3 record last year. Rhett Lashley's the head coach at SMU, former Auburn offensive coordinator. This is Gus Jr. basically. Preston Stone, quarterback last year. He's the quarterback again this year. They're returning quite a few starters, 14 total.
Let's let Terry pontificate. What about Gus Jr. here?
Well,
he likes the big running quarterback.
I'll just go ahead and get it out. I planned on saying this. He, let's see, how do I phrase this? If the head coach at Auburn, who we all know can't control himself sometimes, ends up doing something stupid and doesn't stick around as long as we hope he does, I think Rhett Lashley would possibly be on the short list.
Gotcha.
Went ahead and got that out of the way. But Rhett Lashley obviously has had some success at SMU, but now you've stepped up in competition here to the ACC. So what's that going to look like? They dominated their conference last year, but this ain't the same thing.
That was going to be my comment. That I know they drew Florida State, SMU, and I don't know about Clemson or Miami or the rest of them. I don't remember. One of the things I'll tell you guys is when we looked up, one of the cross references for the research I did was most compelling games in the SEC, and there were like 25 of them. There were not that many in the ACC. One of them listed was Florida State versus SMU. They think Southern Methodist might have a chance to spoil Florida State this year. I don't believe that. Here's why. I don't think that they are a tested program with real competition, to your point, Terry. Strength of schedule does matter. Who the hell's North Carolina playing?
To start the year?
Is it Liberty? I think they drew Liberty. No, but I think they drew Liberty at some point, and Liberty went undefeated or whatever. That doesn't mean Liberty can play with North Carolina, although last year App State took them to the limit. So who knows how that all goes. But my point is, I think Florida State will dog walk these guys. I think they're in about the right number. Maybe they're actually lower than 7 because they haven't have Division I 5-star athletes going to Southern Methodist University.
Well, look right there, 2023, their bowl loss to Boston College.
Boston College, yeah.
They went 11-3 in the. I mean, they were in the Potato Head Conference. So a lot of publications are predicting SMU to be a top 25 team this year.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether that comes to fruition or not remains to be seen. But a lot of people are picking this as the watch out game, SMU and Florida State in late September.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. Number 6, North Carolina. Head coach Mac Brown. Drake May is no longer the quarterback at North Carolina. We now have Max Johnson, who I believe was at Texas A&M.
He was at Texas A&M, and he hasn't won the starting battle yet either, though.
Okay.
So they have another guy named Connor Harrell. He's from Alabama. He's a sophomore.
Okay.
And so they haven't announced who the starter is going to be. And many assume it's going to be Max Johnson.
Okay.
But we'll see. But yeah, the days of Drake May being there to save the day are gone.
Right. Yeah. 8-5 last year, 4-4 in conference, lost the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Not a lot returning on offense. Pretty good number, 7 on defense. So
their defense sucks. So
we still got Chiswick over there at DC.
I think they fired him. Did they fire Chiswick, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the one I said I ranked pretty high. Here's why. You talk about a cupcake schedule. They've got a cupcake schedule.
So here's North Carolina's schedule. Their big game to open the season, Minnesota.
Yeah.
Then they play Charlotte. They play James Madison. They play a 1AA school. Then they have Duke, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and Open. So they could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-0 before their first Open date.
Yep.
And then after that, boom, they play Virginia. Who's trash? 8-0 going into Tallahassee.
Yep.
I picked them losing to Florida State, by the way, because nobody's going to pick them winning in Tallahassee.
I mean, if everything goes right, North Carolina could end up 10-2.
I said 11-1, believe it or not, Dave.
I can see
just by losing to the two teams that are really better than them, Florida State and North Carolina State. Because
that's the thing, though. That last game, those games, it's at North Carolina this year. I mean,
even without Drake May, I put these guys finishing number 2 and going to the ACC championship because of that schedule. The only way it doesn't happen, Dave. Hold on. Don't jump my shit yet. The only way it doesn't happen is if we have an 11-1 or 10-2 tiebreaker scenario and you have to go to strength of schedule.
Okay, let me throw a technicality out here for you, Andrew. This is the top 10, right? Not necessarily a prediction of the rankings. So don't get too caught up in the who's going to win what, but just, the idea in my head, at least, was to rank them. If you think they're better, go ahead and rank them higher. But you see what I'm saying?
Andrew and I are also kind of
looking at this. I ranked them how they're going to finish. Okay. That's how I ranked them.
Go ahead. Let's do next. Number 5.
Number 5, Miami. Mario Cristobal is still there. Tyler Van Dyke's gone. Cam Ward's coming in. I guess people really like Cam Ward, so they're really boosting Miami up. 7-6 last year and lost to Rutgers in the Pinstripe Bowl. I believe that's at where's that at, Andrew? Is that at Yankee Stadium, maybe?
Yep.
Anyway, about half the offense and half the defense coming back.
But they got Cam Ward, who is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, there's one hiccup Cam Ward has. He is a turnover machine. Miami had Tyler Van Dyke starting last year, who was looking at being a first-round pick, and now he's gone to Wisconsin. Didn't even finish the year with Miami.
They've
I
also
don't
got
know if
Mario
Mario
Cristobal that doesn't know how to call a game at the end of it.
Right. So I don't know if Mario Cristobal is a great recruiter, but it's yet to be seen if he can do anything as a coach because he looks like a dumb fuck out there.
Yeah, it was pathetic.
That loss to
It looked
Georgia
really
Tech last
bad.
year was inexcusable.
It was.
He's a position coach at best. Oregon is better for him leaving. He goes back to his alma mater where he won a national championship. Yes, he is a Saban disciple, but this man, to your point, you both just said it, cost his own team football games. You're not a head coach when you do that.
Mm-mm.
And the only way that the only thing he's got going for him would be some of the talent that comes to Miami. The problem is, to Dave's point earlier in the show, Miami isn't the university anymore. It's not the U any longer. And it hasn't been for a very long time. Between the conference realignments and the sanctions and the all of the recruiting violations, the revolving door of head coaches and the criminal activities that have taken place at that university. Miami ain't it. Cristobal is, to me, again, just a position coach. Might be a great position coach, but there is a difference between being a head coach and a coordinator and a position coach. And let's not forget, when he worked for Saban, he worked for Saban. It wasn't anybody else. It was Saban. So I think Miami is going to be the bust of the ACC. And we ain't got to the predictions yet, Terry, but
Oh yeah, we've already stated a lot of it, but yeah, we'll get there.
yeah, I think Miami's overrated out of the gate.
Yeah. Number 4, Louisville. Jeff Brom's still at the helm.
He's an incredible coach, man.
And Jack Plummer is no longer the quarterback for a 10-4 team last year. One conference loss and lost to USC in the Holiday Bowl. This year, Tyler Show, I'll say. I'll have to learn how to pronounce it. Some of these new names I don't get until the second week or so. 5 returning starters on offense, 9 on defense. They got a lot coming back on defense.
And that's a Louisville team that beat the piss out of Notre Dame last year.
Yes.
Yeah, From's a motivator. Jack Plummer was a good quarterback, though. And
till he went to Charlotte and played Florida State.
Well, and they lost to USC, but this goes back to my jab at Dave earlier. The problem I have when you put the bowl game losses and wins on here is it's not really indicative of how good the team was or wasn't.
No, because nobody plays.
Coaches are leaving, players are sitting out. That game, Caleb Williams didn't play. Didn't the USC quarterback hang 5 or 6 touchdowns on him, and he was the backup? Or am I misremembering that?
Yeah, the backup. Yeah, because Caleb Williams didn't play, but
Caleb Williams didn't play in the bowl game. And easy
COVID.
there, Dave. Don't die. But no,
that's the whole thing. You unless you're really a fan of the team,
yeah, you
can't just look at something and know, oh, they lost the bowl game, because you don't know who played. Right. You don't know anything about it because you just don't. I mean, Andrew and I like to laugh and giggle about Florida State getting beat by 60 in their bowl game. Florida State almost didn't have enough people to put in that game. Between people going pro, people in Florida State dressed out one quarterback for that game. One. That's all they had on the team.
Against the number 4 defense or whatever in the country.
Mm-hmm. And he was a true freshman who had only played in a grand total of 3 games. And he was injured for more than half the year. Yeah. So us Florida State fans, we knew what was coming.
Yeah.
We didn't even know if they were going to be able to field a legit team for that game.
Yeah.
But Florida State started the year with 4 scholarship quarterbacks. 2 of them transferred out before the year. One of them broke his foot off. So literally Brock Glenn, true freshman out there with all of his good players sitting out because they're going pro. We knew what was coming.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like on this deal with Braum, just as because we're on Louisville right now, we'll get to Florida State. I'm sure they're number one. With Braum, he has done so much with so little because Purdue ain't no football school, and they won the Big Ten or went to the Big Ten championship game anyway. He won the division to go to the Big Ten. Louisville represented the ACC last year. I have that right, don't I? Against Florida State?
Yeah, Florida State
Right.
beat Louisville and Charlotte. Yeah.
So my point is he does a lot with a little, and Louisville ain't no football school. Yeah, I know they had Lamar Jackson and everything, but they're not a football school. And the Boilermakers sure as shit ain't a football school, and I understand Drew Brees came from there too. So you got 1 in 30 years. You're not, but he's doing a lot.
And Mike Allstott went
nothing.
to Purdue.
Huh?
Mike Allstott went to Purdue.
I don't even know who that is.
Oh my Lord. Tampa Bay Buccaneer legend.
Oh,
Louisville.
Yeah.
Louisville needs to learn how to beat fucking Kentucky. Until then, the best Louisville teams every year lose to Kentucky.
Oh.
All right, let's run down the top three. Number 3, Clemson.
Ooh.
Dabo still at the helm. Will be till he dies, I think. Cade Klubnik coming back. 9-4 last year. 4-4 conference record for Clemson last year.
Yeah, very
And beat
off year
Kentucky
for
in the Gator
Clemson.
Bowl. Yeah, definitely. But the question is, Dabo's got a lot of opinions about the changes to college football and what he's willing to do to build his program and what he's not willing to do. Is he going to be able to hit that top level anymore?
Well, what scares me is that bottom number there. Returning defensive starters. 2.
Yeah.
Dabo is not doing this NIL game and this transfer game. Well, he's paying players, but his transfer game, he's not participating in.
Right.
He's not good at it. Like it's not even.
And he hit gold for a couple years there with Taj Boyd and the guy that likes to get finger blasted by
Taj Boyd. Taj Boyd was awful. He folded under the pressure. I mean, he's the one that got railed by your Seminole defense in Death Valley. That was Taj Boyd.
He's the one that got them back on the board and got to the Orange Bowl.
You're talking about the Cleveland quarterback, and then of course Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun.
So
Watson. He got
Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence.
But more importantly than that, you know better, Dave, than to come on this show and not talk about fucking defense. The Power Rangers, the front 4 of the Clemson defense that just absolutely annihilated Alabama. Mm-hmm. They made that Clemson football team in 2018. That national championship team, they absolutely dominated Alabama. And now none of them even play or can't stay signed in the pros. But since he's lost Brent Venables as DC, because that's what he was missing before to get over the hump that was Florida State, they have gone completely backwards. And if he's unwilling to play the game, we're not talking about Matt Rule in Nebraska, but I listen to him all the time. And what he said was, if you don't want to play in the NIL, you can't coach in NCAA. That was his statement. If you don't want to use NIL in the transfer portal, you don't want to coach NCAA football. All he's saying is this is the game now. This is the system. This is the way things are going to be. Dabo's made it very apparent that he thinks he's Alabama, Georgia, Texas, whatever, and can continue the revolving door. But 4-4 ain't getting it done. 9-4 ain't getting it done. And they'll be lucky to finish in the top 5 of this conference. Because
another year like last year, Dabo's seat's going to start to get warm.
I agree with Terry. 2 national championships, only one since Danny Ford did it in 1980. Yeah. I don't think that Dabo's seat gets very warm.
It will get warm. Trust me. If Dabo has another year like last year, and he does not
already
do
filled
anything,
in Tuscaloosa now too,
and he does not do anything in terms of transfers and NIL, they're going to start looking at ways to get rid of him.
That's a tough one. It's going to be different now.
Look how quickly Texas A&M. Granted, he didn't do it at Texas A&M, but everything they did to get him there. Look how quickly they got rid of Jimbo Fisher.
Now it probably is a little bit different because we look at Penn State and I mean Paterno didn't coach that football team for years before he was gone, but they weren't going to get rid of him. But 2024 is a lot different in college football, and there are some things that you have to do to continue this program to succeed.
Especially
and Dabo
with
just
all
refuses to.
eyes on Florida State and Clemson right now because of the lawsuits.
That's right.
You have to have good years. If one of these or both of these teams go out there and lay an egg, it does not look good.
Right.
This is the old Nebraska argument. You're talking about 9 and 10 wins being bad seasons.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately,
Auburn's
it is.
fired a lot of coaches for that.
But I guarantee you, if Mike Norvell goes the next 5 years, winning 8-9 games, they won't hesitate.
All right, I think we should know who number 2 is. Number 2,
That'd be Notre Dame.
Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Marcus Freeman at head coach. Sam Hartman is not there because he's looking into retirement. 10-3 overall last year, no conference record. I did not include their ACC games. They beat Oregon State in the Sun Bowl. And here's where Riley Leonard ended up. 3 returning starters on offense and 5 on defense. So they got a lot of new players. Riley Leonard's good. We talked about how important he was at Duke. What's Notre Dame look like this year? Are they worth number 2 here?
I think we're gonna know about Notre Dame quickly when they play Texas A&M in week 1.
Yeah.
We're gonna kind of get a feel. Here's the thing. I'm not sold on Marcus Freeman. He is very young. He had no real coaching experience other than a couple years as a coordinator. And it was a splash hire because they knew that he wouldn't do to them what Brian Kelly did. I don't know if he can coach that well. 10-3, he got to 10 wins last year. They should have beaten Ohio State.
Right.
They got mollywopped by Louisville. And I don't know. Their schedule's pretty weak. So they play their ACC games.
They're more Big Ten this year. That's our fault. But go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, they're Virginia, Louisville, Stanford, Florida State, Georgia Tech.
And then they've got Big Ten games, but they're playing the weaker side of the Big Ten too.
They're playing Purdue, and USC from the Big Ten. So then they have Northern Illinois, Texas A&M, Miami, Ohio, and Army and Navy. Obviously, they play Army, Navy every year. But if they don't get to 10 wins this year, something's wrong.
And they'll be
Leonard's
spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, but they do get Florida State in South Bend. So there's that.
Yeah. Where's the USC game? Is it in the Coliseum or is it in South Bend?
Coliseum.
Yeah. So Leonard is a gritty quarterback. We saw that with Duke where he had the injury and he continued to play through the game.
Yep.
Freeman, contrary to what Dave just said, ladies and gentlemen, this is me correcting him, is a good coach, is a good coordinator, understands defense, and I just complimented someone from Ohio State. Fuck off already. And Notre Dame. That's the double shot today. But
I just don't see it.
Freeman, great coordinator, good defensive guy. He's going to get his guys to play for him. That is almost as much of a selling point for some of these coaches as anything else. He's going to get them to play for him. If he gets the boosters to buy into what he's doing in South Bend, he'll be there for a very long time. These guys should beat USC. They should play well against Florida State. I'm not saying they should beat Florida State, but the rest of the schedule favors them to finish very, very high. But again, without being undefeated, that drops them into, the 10, 11, and 12 spots.
Mm-hmm. So at most, they can lose one game.
And it has to be close. To be close. They can't let Florida State beat them by 30 or something.
If they lose to Florida State and USC, I think they get left out.
Yeah. I think that's a fair assessment. And Terry's like, you fucking guys are answering my questions before I asked them already. Florida State, number 1, Terry. Tell us about it. Dave will run it down in a minute.
Mike Norvell still there. Jordan Travis is not there. DJ, and I'll let you try this name, Dave. Have you learned to
It's
say
DJ Uiagalelei.
Uiagalelei? Okay. So 13-1 last year.
Yeah, you say it fast enough, then nobody will say it's wrong.
We've talked about the loss to Georgia in the Orange Bowl a couple of times. We don't have to revisit that. Not a lot of returning starters here. Some of these starter numbers might be a little bit off based on just what we know at certain times, but 4-4 is what I saw online for the starters.
So that's true, and this can go back to all the schools.
Yeah.
Florida State rotates.
Yeah.
Rotates.
Yeah, who's a starter? You got to pick somebody, and
right.
Yeah, it's like, what's a starter mean?
Granted, last year you had Brandon Fisk and you had Jared Verse, who were two all-world. Well, now you have Patrick Payton, you have Farmer, you have Mario Edwards Jr. is now there. So Florida State is supposed to be absolutely stacked on the DL. They're expecting this to be their best linebacking core they've had in years. DJ Lundy's back. They got what's the guy? They got a linebacker from Alabama. So what scares me about Florida State is on offense. The main core of the offensive line is there. Jordan Travis is gone. You have DJ Uiagalelei. He is there. You still have, what's his name? The running back. Running back by committee. So he's back along with the running back from Alabama. And now you have a wide receiver, Malik Benson from Alabama. But the wide receiving core at Florida State is very, very young. Now, they do have a couple 5-stars there, but they don't have a lot of playing time. So Florida State will run as far as those wide receivers take them. DJ Uiagalelei does not have the wheels Jordan Travis had, which I think one of the downfalls you saw with Florida State last year. And when I say downfall, they won these games, but Florida State was in a lot more closer games last year than they were the year before when they really hit their stride, because Jordan Travis was running and doing a lot more because he could. And I think last year it seemed like a lot of times he was trying to not get hurt and to build his stock going to the NFL as more of a throwing quarterback. And it took that aspect of the game away that Florida State had used and was so good. So if DJ Uiagalelei uses his wheels, Florida State should be undefeated at the end of the season going into the playoffs. I don't think Florida State's good enough to win the national championship, but I think Florida State should be 12-0 ending the regular season and go to Charlotte to play for the ACC championship. Yeah. But there could be a hiccup. Miami always gives Florida State hell. Florida State only beat them by 7 last year, and Miami was playing a freshman quarterback at one point in that game. So you never know with Miami and Clemson because, dude, that's how rivalries work. So there's a lot to be said. The returning starter thing, that means jack shit to me because so many people rotated in and out anyway. And, like Patrick Payton and those guys, they didn't play in that bowl game because at one point in time, all those guys were in the transfer portal. And then Florida State brought them back. So those guys are making over $1 million now, and we're sitting here talking about them on podcasts. But it's just you just never know. Lawrence Toafili is the running back that's back that I could not think of his name. So I don't know, but we can obviously do a deeper dive into this because I follow Florida State football so passionately. Just like Andrew with Nebraska. I don't know about these 2 returning starters at Louisville or whatever.
Right.
You know about everybody that's back at Florida State. And I know what's expected. And at Florida State, you're expected to win the ACC every year and go play in a major bowl game.
But I agree with you. I think the expectation to me is 12-0 here. I don't see anything on the schedule unless a hiccup happens, like you said, because you never know.
They get Clemson in Tallahassee, and they get Miami down in Miami. So there is that. But barring something crazy, what worries me the most is, I'm leaving here in a couple weeks and I'm flying to Europe. I'm going to Florida State's first game. Their opening game this season is in Dublin, Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
They fly back to this against Georgia Tech in Dublin, Ireland. They then fly back to the States and play the next week against Boston College. Florida State's playing week 0. They play Boston College week 1. Boston College has all this time to prepare, and that's the one team that really put the fear of God in Florida State last year. Boston College.
They did. Yep, they did.
And Boston College's quarterback, who lit Florida State up in that second half, is back.
I'm going to make one comment because we're overtime here. Your question mark on Florida State is your quarterback. He's your question mark.
Nope.
Because he folded like a chair at Clemson. He's had a second opportunity at Oregon State, and that coach left for Michigan State, and now he's under Norvell here at Florida State. So DJ folded big time at Clemson, couldn't take the pressure. If he has not grown as a quarterback, because I didn't watch that much Oregon State football last year, but I do know the Ducks teed off on him in the Civil War. DJ is your question mark. He's going to be where Florida State wins or loses games, because when the games were put in his hands, he wilted. Very much like a Taj Boyd.
His one loss at Clemson the year before?
No, he had more than one loss, buddy. When Trevor Lawrence was there, he was playing.
Well, he lost against Notre Dame when Trevor Lawrence was there. As the starter, he threw 22 touchdowns to 7 interceptions and had 545 yards rushing with 7 touchdowns. And last year at Oregon State, threw 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and another 6 rushing touchdowns. Now, here's what I'll say.
Go ahead.
Here's what I'll say. I got a guy posted on Twitter last week, and I got a good laugh about it, that Mike Norvell is losing Florida State. His players opted out of the bowl game and yada, yada, yada. He will not be the coach much longer.
Yeah, I don't see
those
that.
Players in Tallahassee love Mike Norvell. He is bringing something back to the university they haven't seen since Bobby Bowden was there. Jimbo Fisher got Florida State a national championship, but by all accounts, Jimbo Fisher was a huge asshole and nobody liked him. That is not the same with Mike Norvell. And Mike Norvell knows what he's doing with quarterbacks. He turned Jordan Travis, who left Louisville because he couldn't see the field, never could get on the field with Willie Taggart as the coach at Florida State because they said he couldn't throw a football, and turned him into an NFL draftee in literally 2.5 seasons. Because Travis didn't play. He was splitting time between that guy from UCF. I can't remember his name, but 2.5 years. When Jordan Travis finally took over the reins as quarterback at Florida State, it took off. And he did that under the coaching of Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell does have offensive coordinator. He calls the plays. He works with those quarterbacks. And apparently, DJ Uiagalelei went to Florida State because everybody thought it was Cam Ward number 1, DJ Uiagalelei number 2 as the top prospect quarterbacks. Florida State wanted DJ all the way. And apparently they never even worried about Cam Ward because he was off. I'm going to Miami. I'm going to the NFL. I don't know. Florida State went right to DJ.
Right.
And we want you here. He wanted to be there. So I'm interested to see because the dude can play football, because I've seen him light Florida State up like there was no tomorrow, because a couple years ago he was unstoppable and they stomped. Well, Florida State made a late surging comeback to make it look respectable, but he stomped them. So, but all that says, if anything happens to him, Florida State's going to a redshirt freshman and a true freshman quarterback, because that's what they got on the roster, and they are screwed.
Yeah, it's going to be similar to, yeah.
Although according to reports, Brock Glenn has looked very good, But the next quarterback in Tallahassee is the third string right now, and that's Luke Cromenheit. He is the next big thing at quarterback in Tallahassee if everything plays out the way it's supposed to.
So let me run down the top 10 real quick, and then we'll get into some questions to wrap it up. Number 10, Virginia Tech. Number 9, Duke. Number 8, NC State. Number 7, SMU. Number 6, North Carolina. Number 5, Miami. Number 4, Louisville. Number 3, Clemson. Number 2, Notre Dame. And number 1, as they should be, Florida State Seminoles.
FLORIDASTATE. Florida State, Florida State, Florida State.
Thanks, Dave. Why don't we go to the next slide and we'll ask a few questions we've pretty much already answered. And I forgot I did not put the actual questions on the slide, so I got to look in our notes to get to this, don't I? Okay, so here's what we do every week with these preview shows. Which 2 teams go to the championship game? Who wins? I'll start out. Obviously, Notre Dame is not included in that. We included Notre Dame in the rankings and the preview, but they're not part of this. So I would say Florida State and NC State, with Florida State winning. What about you, Dave?
Right now, I would say Florida State Clemson would get a redo. But I could see Florida State Miami, because here's the thing. Even if Florida State does lose to Notre Dame, it's not a conference loss. So they're still golden when it comes to the ACC championship. So I would say Florida State Clemson. NC State and Miami are right there, though, because they just don't play anybody.
All right, what about you, Andrew? What you got?
Florida State, North Carolina.
I would love that. I'd go to that game.
And the reason for it is North Carolina's schedule. But they are without Drake May, and that matters.
Yeah.
So that does matter. But they've also got a coach that's had a pretty good quarterback and receiving core and won a national championship. So just was 19 years ago now.
And one of the greatest national championships ever.
Yeah, this is barn burner. But no, I would go with and the reason for that, my logic for that, is Clemson is going to lose multiple games this year. They will not make the ACC title game, I don't believe. Even though Georgia, that 3-score loss to open the season, is a non-conference game. But Georgia is going to hand it to Clemson in the opening game of the season.
All right, next question. We'll let you go first this time, Andrew. Which coaches we'll say who's on the hot seat this year, and who do you think will be fired?
Who's on the hot seat?
It's not as straightforward for me in the ACC, honestly.
No, it's really not. Cristobal cannot make bonehead mistakes like he did last year at Miami. You can't cost your team games as the head coach. That's it. And the clock management is what did it. That doesn't fall on the players. That's the head coach. I would also say that just lost it. Virginia Tech's guy's too early. Dorian, the Wolfies love. Cristobal and who the hell was I thinking? Now I can't even think about it. I think of it. It'll come back to me.
All right, Dave, won't you go? I'll wrap it up after you go.
I'll say Virginia's in a predicament where they've got to show some improvement. Tony Elliott is 6-16 at Virginia in his 2 years. They've got to show some kind of improvement here. I think if Virginia gets to 5 wins, he's safe. I haven't looked at their schedule. 1, 2, 3. I see 3 non-conference wins. They win 2 in conference. I think he keeps his job. But Mario Cristobal, if he does anything stupid, I think he's in trouble, and his seat will start to get hot. But everybody else is pretty much cemented right now. Georgia Tech's not touching their coach. If anything happens, he will leave and go to a bigger program.
Right.
But Wake Forest, they're not doing anything with their coach. He's built them up. Pitt, maybe? I don't even know who the hell their coach is anymore.
Pat Narduzzi, and that's
Pat
who I was
Narduzzi.
going to mention if nobody else did. I don't know that he will be fired, but I can see
the seat will
him.
get warm.
Yeah.
Old Michigan State defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Worked
So,
for the one that followed Saban.
If Dabo has a down year, it's going to start to warm up. He won't get fired, but it's going to start to warm up.
Be a lot of talk. A lot of talk.
I don't think. Yeah, Tyler from Spartanburg needs to call again.
You mean Tyler?
But Dabo really needs defense. And you just said Tony Elliott. That was his offensive coordinator, up to a couple years ago. So, anyway.
All right. Well, let's talk about underrated, overrated. So we've kind of talked about it already. I'll go ahead and start. I'm with you, Dave. I think NC State is underrated. Overrated.
Just say Miami, Terry. Come on, do it. In the Auburn fan, you want to do it. You want to say Miami.
I was about to say Clemson, but yeah, we'll go with Miami. Who's next? Andrew, you want to go?
I think Clemson is overrated. I mean, there's an expectation because they've won so much that they're going to continue to win, but Dabo is missing key elements that brought him success. And until he replaces those elements, he's not going to win. He may win 9 games. He may win 10 games. Dave's sitting here saying his seat's going to get hot if he only wins 10 games. And Clemson was a shit program before Dabo Swinney took over as the head coach 17 years ago now, 16 years, something. He's been there a long time.
In 2006?
Was it 6 or 8? Either it don't matter.
Might have been 8.
I know Nebraska beat him in the Gator Bowl, but it doesn't matter. He is a very well tenured coach who's won 2 national titles and played.
He wins 10, he's fine.
Yeah.
He wins 8 or 9, there's going to start to be talk. He ain't going anywhere.
Next week, I'm talking teetotal shit about Ryan Day, but we're not talking the Big Ten yet. His seat's going to get real hot after they spent $25 million building a team. But Cristobal is in Miami, to me, are overrated. I think that our poll anyway put the Wolfies underrated. I do believe the Wolfpack is a better football team. Duke was a little high. Virginia Tech was a little low in my mind. I think Florida State is the cat's meow, and I'm not saying that because Dave's here, because I love to argue with his ass. But until you take them down and beat them, they're the team to beat. They are the ACC right now. And 3 years ago, Norvell was what, 3-5? It was the COVID year, 4 years ago now. So there was talk of his ass going bye-bye.
No, it was his first year was COVID. Norvell's never been on the hot seats because after his second year,
you don't read enough of the third-party sports sites, sir. To tell me that I'm wrong about Norvell just because you're an insider to Florida State.
Well, Norvell got an extension his second year.
Yeah,
and he started that year. He started that year like 1-5.
He's done the right thing. He really has.
He's building it up.
But you made an interesting point too, and it is something that matters. He's got 4-4 coming back, but he had a very good transfer portal. Portal.
Florida State.
He got started from other teams, is what I'm getting at.
Other big teams,
big teams. But Clemson's overrated. Miami's overrated. State and Virginia Tech, in my mind, underrated.
Right. All right, Dave, you got any sleepers or overrated teams we hadn't mentioned? You said something about Cal earlier.
Cal?
It wasn't Cal. It was he's a Georgia Tech guy. Yeah,
I think Georgia Tech is underrated. I think they're they're not going to be a top 25 team. I think they might surprise some people. I would have NC State way higher than what was there. So my 2 down are NC State and Georgia Tech. And as for overrated, It's got to be Miami. I just don't see it, and until they prove it, then that's it. But Miami's supposed to have been back for a couple years now, and it just hasn't turned on the field. So
there's a lot of excitement for Miami. I won't just bust in your balls when I said Miami is, supposed to win the ACC. There are press writers that do this for a living. We do this for fun. They're saying Miami is the team to beat in the ACC. I don't see it, guys. I don't see it. And part of the reason I don't see it is the expectation, to your point, Dave, has been so high with Miami, but it's been high for 20 freaking years. And they keep firing their coaches or getting sanctions or division, whatever. So anyway.
And my dumbass earlier, we need to correct myself. I said Mario Edwards and I meant Marvin Jones. So.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Mario.
That's okay. Some YouTube commenter will say something about it and call you more.
But you have to think about this. Florida State has the number 6 transfer portal class for what they brought in. And you're talking about one. You got Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Alabama, Miami, West Virginia, LSU, Georgia, and 2 from Oregon State, plus an Indiana, a Harvard, and a Colorado. Not freaking bad. That's a lot of time coming in.
From earlier, because you just mentioned the Oregon State guy, DJ. He lost the starting job at Clemson. Guess it wasn't. He got games. He got his ass fired for throwing those 7 interceptions. So
he got benched,
sir.
He got benched in the ACC title game.
Before they lost, they threw his ass on the bench, and then he
got benched in the ACC title game for Cabe Klubnik, and then he left.
Then he decided to go play for Smith, and Smith, they got dog walked by the best teams in the Pac-12, but that happens.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for coming on, Dave. But we got one more thing to talk about that I think is going to be fun this year. Andrew and I have been picking games. We tried to figure out how to do it and compete with that all year last year. But this year, ESPN's doing a college football pick'em. So there'll be a list of games that you pick, kind of like you do in the bowls or in the college basketball tournament. So they're going to do that for the season. I've created one for the TNA Top 10, and I will get that information out. Please join this, and at the end of the show each week, we'll talk about who's winning that. And we might talk about if there's any kind of winner's prize. We got some ideas, but as always, we don't decide anything until it's almost too late. So we hadn't figured that out yet.
We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Well, what is decided, because I would hate to not mention it, is that they had an open practice at the University of Nebraska last night. And Dylan Raiola was taking the first team snaps. And he will be the second old freshman quarterback. True freshman since touchdown Tommy. But all joking aside, Terry, next week's the Big Ten, buddy, and then it's football time.
We'll talk a lot more about that practice next week, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. Yes, I have lots of notes and thoughts, and I've only mentioned them a couple times today in 2.5 hours.
So I'm going to wrap it up for us. I was only here for half of it this time. I appreciate you guys handling the other show for me. And
we were lost without you. I know you're trying to wrap this up, but I called you Dad because we were lost without you.
We're a good team. I'll just say that.
Damn.
We are a good team. And I appreciate you guys doing that. Thank you, Allison. We don't mention Allison as much on the football show, but she's back there helping us out. When I throw a shot at Sam Hartman being old, she has to respond and all that kind of stuff. But thank you. It's been fun as always. Thanks to Dave for coming on. That was great having him on to talk about the ACC, which he knows a lot about. And it was a great show. I really appreciate everybody that came on. All the comments from the people in the chat that have watched us. That's about it, Andrew. You got any final thoughts before I wrap it up?
Next week, it's the Big Ten, and we don't know what the other poll is. I did mention, and I don't know if you heard, Terry, because I know you were watching but not on. Yeah. I did mention we could do the tag teams you and Dave talked about for the professional wrestling, but who knows? Because that's a fun poll. So,
that's if we don't want a third third round of Olympics. We got any Olympics ideas?
Maybe.
We'll
We
have
could
to
do
come up with
something.
something good, though.
Yeah, it'd have to be good because we already did events and we did American. Yes, thank you, Rochelle, for joining us. That was awesome. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
We've done
Alex
events.
Wheaton, Heather Whitley. These are the names I see in the chat. There may be others chatting elsewhere or that listened in, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
But we did the Americans and we did and look, the American list, buddy, had a few surprises. Mark Spitz was not on the list. So, and I know
He
you
was
know
an
that 'cause
option.
you put
People just did not put him up there for some
you put the
reason.
slides together. Yeah. 1 and 2 went about like I expected. But
Yeah.
anyway, maybe something Olympics. Who knows? Maybe best Olympic cities, something like I don't know. I mean, we got to lean
Yeah,
on the
we'll have
World
to
Traveler
talk
for that.
about it. We
We
got to
have to
come
think
up
about
with it
that.
in the next couple of days so we can get it out there to you guys. But we appreciate everybody that votes. We really want to push on getting the votes in for the football poll because I will tell you, we get a lot more votes for the other poll than we do football right now. But football season hadn't started. Hopefully that picks up more. We'll try to do our best to get it out there and in your hands so that you see it in time so that you can vote. Football will be a little bit more difficult because we don't want you voting before the games, but we need you to vote before we do the show. So there's not going to be a lot of time. We'll get back into that later. We'll work through all that and put it out there. But one last thing to say, as I always do on the football show, be a champ this week in whatever you do. Thanks for coming. See you guys next time.